Um, Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Bida Jr. I'm your host today for the second Cafe 6 this month. This is the space where we bring real talk to the table, dive into political issues that impact Native and rural communities in Northern Arizona and beyond. So we're not just sipping coffee, but we want to stir up ideas, action, and a whole lot of good trouble, whether it's birthright citizenship, uranium cleanup, trade policies, education policies, and the rising cost of living. We want to learn, gather, share, build together. So again, Cafe 6 happens twice a month. It happens on the first Friday and the third Friday of the month. So mark your calendars, make it a habit to pull up your chair, bring a friend, and plug into the conversations that matter the most. So today's first guest is Harley Interpreter. Harley graduated with her Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology with a minor in Native American Studies at Diné College. She is now the Project and Legislative Specialist under the Office of Legislative Affairs and Special Projects. Formerly, she interned as the Social Media Engagement Agent, Ascendium, and the Museum and Archive Center at Diné College, which she calls her second home. As a projects and legislative aide, she assists the Office of the President and Chief of Staff by, and I was going to find a different word because I'm pretty sure I'm not going to say it right, liaising between divisions, researching legislation, managing requests, and responding to inquiries, priorities, and support. So let's give a warm Cafe 6 welcome to Harley Interpreter. Harley, you have the floor.
All right, sounds good. Hello, everybody. All right. So yat she Harley interpreterian shiat globitanenishle saraskay bashichin ashin deshiche do tlazaflana dashanella. And I am from Forest Lake, Arizona. And I am currently positioned here at Diné College, our main campus. And I've been calling Diné College my second home. But I suppose first and foremost, I'm here more so in my personal capacity and as a community member, and don't want to speak too much for the college institution itself. But I don't mind sharing information and what we've been doing so far, at the TCU level, and in general regarding higher education and our work with, state and tribal entities. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, awesome. So I guess just some things to cover a little bit. Um, some things unique to Jeanette College, and I guess just in general for our TCU engagement. We do have like student opportunities. One of them being like our ASDC, our um, associative student uh, college governance. And in addition to that, we also have a position where a student can also participate specifically with the Navajo Nation Council. And those are two areas in which students can engage civically. But one thing we did emphasize is that a lot of it has to come from the students, their engagement, their voice, their capacity. They hold a lot more weight in terms of any kind of issues. And that's primarily where we want to stress um, I guess just any kind of support, even alumni as well. Those kinds of testimonials would help um, uh, any TCU, any college, wherever it is um, that our community comes from. And I would like to highlight another opportunity, which is usually our legislative summit that our leadership and as well as student representatives participate in. And this is perhaps one of the more crucial areas of advocacy work and also obtaining that kind of experience. And that's primarily where my experience comes from. As a student, I had, I believe it was my initial introduction to civic engagement was during the during 2020 during COVID, and I believe that's also the efforts we also did with Lauren and our at the time associative student representative, student body rep, and that's where we got introduction into our voter registration, and we were able to set up voter outreach information with then Katie Hobbs. And that was a really big initiative. Other things that we've held there at the college is like the Navajo Nation debates. And that's also an opportunity to allow students to come up with questions and ask our representatives of the issues that are on their mind. But some specific information in case some of you guys aren't aware in regards to tribally controlled universities. So TCUs are public institutions of higher education, and they're chartered by federally recognized Indian tribes or the federal government. And there's about 34 TCUs in the US, operating 90 sites in 16 states. And about 80% of Indian country is served by TCUs, and 7 of the 10 largest Indian reservations have TCUs, and more than 245 federally recognized tribes have students at TCUs. And each year, TCUs serve about 160,000 American Indians and Alaska Natives and other rural community residents in academic and community-based programs. So back to our efforts, a lot of it was in terms of reassuring tribal sovereignty and delivery on trust and treaty obligations protected in the administration's implementation and its of its executive orders and priorities. So there were about 3 main points in which we were asking and highlighting and communicating with Congress as we, this is during like our legislative sessions. And this is something that all TCUs were able to participate in, as well as our student representatives. So above all, it was a call to the administration to ensure tribal nation sovereignty and the United States delivery on its trust and treaty obligations, and that they do not become collateral in the administration's implementation of its priorities, such as limiting DEIA and environmental justice initiatives, restricting the federal workforce and addressing education. And so this is the general language that I have been seeing used, even in terms of like our Navajo Nation. If you guys aren't familiar, I believe just recently, back in their April 11th release, was the Navajo Nation passing and also calling on federal government to uphold government to government relations and reaffirming political and legal status with tribes. But again, back to higher education, the 3 points were that tribal nations, tribal citizens, and tribal communities have a unique political status. So tribal nations are inherently sovereign governments and recognized under United States and international law. Tribal nations have a political relationship with our own people, and that the United States owes trust and treaty obligations to tribal nations and Native people that exist in perpetuity, are political in nature and are debt-based. Additionally, the US court decisions have consistently reaffirmed the legal and political status of tribal nations and Native people, including in recognizing that delivery of trust and treaty obligations to tribal nations and Native peoples does not amount to racial discrimination against others under equal protection principles. And our call to action was to support these clear directives and actions that reinforce the political status of tribal nations, citizens, and communities. The second was in regards to federal funding for tribal programs, and that it is legally mandated and must not be delayed or reallocated. Funding tribal programs is not discretionary spending. This includes federal funding used and federal employees necessary for services. For services the federal government delivers to tribal communities. And it also includes federal funding provided to tribal nations so that we may deliver services to our people. Funding tribal programs is part of the United States trust and treaty obligations, and thus is funding is legally mandated. So many of the students authorizing or appropriating funds, many of the statutes authorizing and appropriating funds for tribal programs recognize that they carry out trust and treaty obligations, and those statutes serve as an independent legal mandate. And the general call to action for that was to ensure, of course, federal funding for tribal programs and that they're not paused, reallocated, reclassified, or deprioritized. And additionally, we added to not create unnecessary bureaucratic hurdles that disproportionately impact tribal governments, and just ensuring that the limiting of federal workforce, sufficient federal employees are available to deliver on those obligations. Thirdly, that tribal colleges and universities are extensions of the tribal governments that charter them. And that means tribal colleges and universities, TCUs, are public institutions that offer open enrollment to anyone, saying that it's not just, for Native American or, in our case, Navajo students. It's open to everyone, even internationally. A delay or freeze in funding would reduce the available programs and services and force the majority of TCUs to close their doors within 6 months or less. Also, the administration and Congress have long recognized TCU programs and funding as essential to the economic success of the rural communities through the workforce development, agricultural innovation, and as one of the largest employers in the area. And the call to action for that was to ensure that TCUs are recognized as supporting tribal nations. Do not mislabel TCUs under any administrative initiatives, including those purporting to address racial inequity. And in addition to that, there was a general look at possibilities of impact, and of course, things that we're concerned about is reduced institutional services affecting the overall student experience, operational viability. Institutions may operate forever how long, but would require emergency funding afterward, and perhaps financial consequences such as federal funding freeze. This would make it impossible for many programs to continue running. Impact on students would be unable to afford education without federal supports, as well as faculty staff layoffs and cutbacks. Um, Impact on research, major research projects related to language revitalization and agriculture would be halted. Mm, and let's see. Um, there is, I think there hasn't really been major policy changes, but in terms of like some of the federal funding, we were asked to be cautious of language changes and just to be intentional about the language and grant applications to avoid potential funding freezes. So that was perhaps one of the main adjustments we've made. And overall, just in terms of discussions, it's been emphasized that while these changes will cause generational damage, pretty much Native communities have survived worse. Um, and I just know that overall, from TCU's communities and even with our tribal nations, the overall message is, one of hope and resilience, and just stressing that these challenges are significant, but these communities have strength and wisdom to get through this difficult period. um, let's see. And of course, just stressing that in regards to like Department of Educational potential changes, one thing was being stressed is that can't be completely dissolved without congressional approval. And overall, what their strategy is, massive staff reductions, the funding in critical programs, just kind of lighting all these different kinds of fires and creating confusion and kind of backing things up. But so far, we've just been addressing them as we go. And again, a lot of that is thanks to the efforts with specifically AHEC, the American Indian Education Consortium. And that's where where a lot of the TCUs are able to come together for these, for our legislative priorities and efforts. And that's primarily, the work that we do with them at that level. Let's see. In regards to advocacy strategies, some recommendations were to emphasize on economic impact, job creation, workforce development, and of course, maintaining relationships with our political supporters and also working with congressional allies. And mitigation efforts included, of course, collaborating with colleges, again, across TCUs, preparing support systems for potential disruptions, and developing contingency plans, and just generally maintaining communication networks. I believe that is it thus far. In terms of, just our efforts and broadly speaking on kind of what's happening here and even with our tribal nations and state and federal efforts.
So, Harley, thank you for that. And this is so critical for all of us to hear right now, and to remind everyone, you have you're a voter, you're an individual citizen, you're a Navajo Nation community member, but you have this position that you hold with the college, and and I know sometimes it's very important in these sessions to clearly reiterate to everyone, what your opinions are personally versus the stance of the employer, because I know they're in a tough position. But before we ask any questions from the audience, um, is there anything you would like to say personally from you that you would like to share with us? Your personal thoughts on everything that's going on, um, just briefly, and then we can open it up for a few questions from the audience and attendees. And while we get prepared for that, if any of you have some questions, maybe throw some of those questions into the chat, and you'll see that I also responded with what TCUs are in the chat. So go ahead, Harley.
Very well. Thank you so much. Um, right now, hmm, in terms of personal opinions, mm, I really appreciate, some focus being on education, especially with if some of you haven't heard, one of the buildings here at our college was recently burned down. And so this has sparked up a lot of concern, of course, for our students. And just seeing as how, prior to all of these changes, even with the loss of some leadership as well, specifically speaking to our president, Dr. Russell. Um, just having seen and worked with these individuals, and prior to a lot of this chaos, um, just seeing exactly how essential um, all areas of our faculty and staff are, and the mechanisms at the legislative and projects level, um, that um, is kind of I know we're trying to get to everything, but just generally, it is very much a slow process. But we're trying to address everything and just work with everybody. And then also at the TCU level, um, it's, I guess, just I would like to see more support, just to all TCUs, because a lot of that support, even just those, like I mentioned previously, those testimonials, they help TCUs to reach out, um, and put forward proposals to enhance things. And that could just be like at the projects level with enhancing buildings, and getting those kinds of things that are necessary to maintain, um,
Could I just get a serving?
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'll you go ahead and finish what you wanted to say, and then I'm going to read a couple of the questions in the chat, and then we can close up. So go ahead. Any last comments?
Um, just that um,
It's really tough. I know you're dealing with so much. The schools are,
yeah.
put in a very tough situation. And I wanted to just read a few of the comments that some of the attendees are have written in the chat. So Steve G commented, this is so important. There are particular nations that are being affected. Angie mentioned that sounds like through this chaos, you are handling this very well. Um, Mike Konecki mentioned that what is the role, or asks, what is the role of the Department of Education in higher ed in general and TCUs in specific? And is there fear if the Department of Education is abolished that TCUs could fall in between the cracks?
Yes, that is the general concern. Um, and I think in regards to that, I haven't really been privy to those kinds of conversations, but yes, that is the general concern, of course. Um, but I mean, even then, we would still be, working together with TCUs and AHEC to try and work around those things and just see, what we can do. Even at the state level, everybody's asking us and always reassuring that we can communicate with them and see if there's anything that's needed from our TCUs. If anything comes to a halt, to be sure to just communicate with their offices. And that has been just kind of our efforts thus far.
Thank you. Now we have Topher who asks, how can we as general Arizona U.S. citizens support Diné College and TCUs?
I believe definitely get familiar with your local TCUs, look up their sites and see exactly, what kind of students that your TCU serves. And also, let's see, I would also encourage looking at the AHEC site. They have all of our legislative priorities listed there for each state. And they have a general map that looks at all the TCUs and their efforts as well as, their standing.
We have another question from M. Thomas. Are there efforts to integrate TCU graduates or alumni into existing infrastructures within their tribal communities? For instance, AHEC, IHS, or 638 partnerships for career development?
I'm pretty sure, and they're going to be all different for each TCU. For Diné College, we don't, we currently are working, to establish outreach for our alumni. But that right now is kind of currently on a halt. It's fallen under our projects department. So that's just something that needs to get going as well.
So challenging. You are all juggling, spinning plates. So again, I commend this effort that you're all working through with this shifting ground, and this is so important and reassuring to hear from not just you, but know that you're all working on this, and I know everyone's being as careful as they navigate through this period of time. And it's sad, but I want to say thank you for everything you're doing. I'm going to read a couple more Cafe 6 chat questions. I'll read several of them together now, and then we'll, in the next couple minutes, we'll go ahead and start wrapping up, and then we're going to transition over to our second guest. So let me go ahead and read a few of these, and then you can think about them and then answer them kind of collectively. So I'm going to read Nicole Horseherder writes, tribal colleges allow rural students to get additional background that is needed to be successful in the workplace. It helps folks prepare to work in tribal spaces and schools, which is about DEI and specializing training needed to understand and work within the tribal systems in place. A lot of those systems were shaped in part by non-Indigenous BIA representatives. And then Larry Romo mentions great info. He works at Northland Pioneer College, which is part of the Arizona Community College system, and has a center at Kienta and works with Diné College. And he also mentions that there's coverage of the entire tribe and federal level. When they cover from the state community college level. And they also do that at Hopi in two different directions. So Diane Green asks, how much of TCU funding comes from the Department of Education? So go ahead and think about those comments and questions, and you can respond.
I'm actually not sure how much comes, to specifically to Net College. That's perhaps information also that I'm unable to comment on. But otherwise, yeah. And just looking at Diné College, we have 6 different sites across Arizona, New Mexico, and now Utah. And we have been primarily, involved in both Arizona and New Mexico. And we've just now begun. Prior to all of this, we had begun efforts to start working with Utah State, and that has been they have been very supportive and willing to work with us, especially now with all that's going on. And let's see. And I don't know if you guys have seen a map yet, but yeah, Navajo Nation is a pretty large space. Additionally, we are trying to open up a site over at Dilcon, and that's coming soon. Otherwise, one other thing to note is, and that may make Diné College pretty unique, is our law program that was just recently established. And we definitely have been encouraging our students and community members to get involved, and that this is one of the ways to get involved as well. It was initially, an effort for helping our community in different capacities. As was previous mentioned with Navajo Nation, there's a backlog as well of their cases and so forth. And this would be, however they're involved, those enrolled, this surely there's a lot to cover with what's happening currently. But yes, thank you for those comments.
Awesome. Well, Harley, again, thank you for joining us this morning. This was very informative. I thank you for all the work that you are doing, dedicated to your work in education, and it's really special to have you as one of our guests. So I hope that we can invite you back again a second time, maybe next month, in the coming months, while you are able to gather more information. And I'm sure we'll all definitely be very interested in hearing more. So thank you again, Harley, for your time this morning. So again, to everyone here at Cafe 6, we really appreciate all of the information, all the ideas, all the work that our guests are working on in their respective fields. So thank you, Harley.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. So the time now is 9:37. We're going to transition over to our second guest. So I want to go ahead and share with you just a reminder. Cafe 6 happens twice a month. It's on the first Friday and the third Friday of every month. So make sure you're keeping that on your calendars. So our second guest, he'll be coming on in just a minute. He's actually he works here in Arizona with Northern Arizona University, but he also does a lot of research and work all throughout the country. So I'll give a little bit more information about his bio in a moment. But right now he's traveling. He's on the road up in northern New Mexico. So I want to just go ahead and introduce to you Dr. Tommy Rock. So let me share a little bit about Dr. Tommy Rock. So Dr. Tommy Rock, just like Harley Interpreter, they're both people of the Diné Navajo Nation. So they're Dr. Tommy Rock, though, he's from Miami Valley, Utah, and he's the first in his family to earn a doctoral degree. He currently serves as the professor of environmental justice at Northern Arizona University. He is also a presidential postdoctoral research fellow at Princeton University's Department of Geosciences, where he leads efforts to identify, monitor, and communicate environmental hazards caused by uranium mining and oil and gas extraction on the Navajo Nation. He has a bachelor's degree from Arizona State University in environmental geography and recreational management, followed by a master's in sustainable communities and a PhD in earth science and environmental sustainability from Northern Arizona University. Dr. Work, Dr. Rock worked at the University of Utah on occupational and environmental health research with Northern Plains tribes and with the Navajo Nation EPA on public water systems. He is on a mission to integrate environmental science, public health, and traditional Navajo ecological knowledge to shape more just and culturally respectful policies. So let's give a warm Cafe 6 welcome to Dr. Tommy Rock. Dr. Tommy Rock, go ahead. You have the floor.
Hi. Uh, I'm traveling right now to Taos, New Mexico to do some field work up in the mountains just east of Taos. And I am happy to be here. And let me introduce myself for now. But first, yata kasi na siya Tommy Rock and siya donde o de todo na Sunday. Kasi da Nina ano sa sikin ada sa donde ya no da sin snot sa samba sa sin. But it's in that siya look at na that's enough. But I didn't slido lake and Sunday ada salka. I I am originally from Oljeto, a place called Copper Canyon. That's where I grew up with my grandparents, and I am currently a professor at Northern Arizona University. And for today's topic, it's like we talking about water.
Here's
Like,
the dude.
hello, yes,
No, sorry, Tommy. Go ahead. Go ahead. We'll ask everyone to stay on mute until we get to the Q&A portion. Thank you.
okay. Oh, as I was saying, it's like and I do um, work on making water accessible, and starting with my chapter as well. But I do have this nonprofit organization called Honor Water, where I work on making water accessible. I work on springs that were already worked on before. This is like dating back to the early 1920s when the Public Health Service initiated this program on utilizing these spring sources and making water accessible for a lot of the Navajo Nation using these like hand pumps. So right now I'm just like basically restoring them, fixing the pipes, fixing the tanks, getting new tanks, bigger tanks, and making use of them again. So that's basically what I'm working on. And I work with community members that want that restored. So I go write small grants and um, hire some of the local folks in that area, and we work on these projects. The process, I talk to them about water quality, talk to them about the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Clean Water Act, and how these policies help address public health, um, making sure the water quality is good. So I do sample the water, take them back, and analyze the water for heavy metal. If there's like any elevated levels of heavy metal like arsenic or uranium, I let the community know. And that in those cases, I tell the community members like those are for livestock use only, and so so my first future research and work will be around water filtration system. I'm already working on stuff like that with University of Arizona with Vicky from University of Arizona and under Dr. Coletta Chief's program Indigenous Fuse, help make a nano water filtration system, and some of them are being used on Navajo Nation in certain part of Navajo Nation. And there are 2 or 3 water filtration systems that are being used inside Manavella Tribal Park. And the idea is to keep doing that and try to put those water filtration systems in areas where it's needed. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot more research as well. And there are other organizations such as Dig Deep that are working in this area, this topic that we're talking about water accessibility and, and all. So my presentation was just like brief and fast. So if you have any questions, just let me know. So
Okay.
yeah.
I thank you, Tommy, and I know that you're doing a lot today and traveling, so we thank you for being able to jump on briefly. Let me ask a couple, share a little bit of questions from the chat, and if you also are listening, if you have any questions, please put it into the chat, or if you're able to raise your hand on Zoom, we can go ahead and have you speak. So we have Mike Kaneki, who is commenting or asking, are reverse osmosis filters effective on heavy metals?
Yes, they are. They are effective on heavy metal. They are big systems that cost millions of dollars. And then there are systems that can be used and put them underneath the sinks or can be put outside and they can filter out a lot of the heavy metal. But the problem with uranium is like once it starts filtering out a lot of the uranium, then it get concentrated, and then it'll be like a radioactive. It'll be like um radiation coming off of that. So that's a problem. So a way to address that, and that's something that I'm thinking about as well. Like I know there are certain spring and water sources that are like that, and I am thinking about that. And when I do research project around this topic of contaminated water, especially with uranium, um, be collaborating with Neville EPA and way to dispose of it or address that. So that's something that I'm thinking about as well.
Got it. And then Angie asks, have you considered using mycelium to help filter the water?
That I have not. I have not considered that. I haven't do that yet. But I do. I am thinking about trying biochar as well. But that's something that I can go look into that as well. So,
And I know that down in South America, they have a lot of water degrees, studies that are available because a lot of the agriculture that I researched and looked up, you have a lot of countries that, let's say they have a lot of coffee exports and they have a lot of advanced types of agriculture or what do you call that when it's like a land dam or you kind of like put multiple dams along like a mountain area or a slope to kind of help the water recharge into the ground. I noticed that a lot of these places they are able to even create customized filters based on contaminants in those areas. But some of the problem is that when you're creating these custom filters, let's just say that you create a filter that's focused on extracting and filtering radioactive material like uranium. It becomes a problem that now you need like a specialized transport system that's going to be transporting, I think, like your radioactive waste. So then there's all sorts of regulations for that. Um, what what do you think can be done here in the U.S. with importing some of these other types of technologies or practices from out of the country?
I think doing research on them will be really good and see how effective they are, and especially working with this topic is that working with the regulators. In our case, it'll be the tribal regulators working with them, and even working with for our region, for Never Nation, they work a lot with USCP Region 9. So working with them as well and addressing that as well. Like that'll be a good way to go about it and see how effective we are, and of course, like, keep people safe is like the will be the ideal goal in a situation like that as well.
All right. And I know that today you said you're in New Mexico. I think we have several people in the attending that are elected officials, and also I think one in particular is in New Mexico as an elected official. Can you tell us a little bit more of what part of New Mexico you're doing this research in? And I'm gonna ask in the chat if this individual is if that's his district.
Oh, uh, around or close to Taos, New Mexico.
All right, I just put in the chat. I'm asking if that's this individual's elected region to serve. So, again, thank you for this time, Dr. Tommy Rock. I want to go ahead and see if some people have some additional questions. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand in the Zoom, or you could also put a question into the chat. So let me ask, Dr. Rock, are there any? Oh, we got Mike Konecki raised his hand. Mike, let's go ahead and have you go ahead and unmute yourself, and then you can ask a question.
I was just wondering the fact that chemotherapy is so much less toxic these days than it was 15, 20 years ago. Does anybody know, is that because they're more targeting the poisons of the radiations, or have they found a way to mitigate radiation?
Mike, can you say that one more time? The therapy, what type of therapy are you talking about?
Chemotherapy,
Okay.
where radiation is used to destroy cancer tumors, which used to be quite poisonous, 20 years ago. And these days, it's people don't even necessarily lose their hair. So I was just curious if they found a way to mitigate or change the nature of the radiation, or is that more effectively targeted?
Dr. Rock, if you want to go and answer that, go ahead.
I can ask a friend of mine. He's a medical doctor. I can ask him that question and see what he says, and I can relay that information back to you and find and answer your question.
Okay, we'll gather these notes. And I wanted to ask Dr. Rock, what are some of the big major annual like water conferences that happen around the world? And have you had a chance to go to any of these big conferences or research symposiums all around the world?
That I am not sure of. I know there's a couple of them in the state of Arizona. And I did see one that's going to be happening in Alaska, a big conference up in Alaska about water. That's the one that I know about. I'm pretty sure there are more. And then I'm just reading this message about it says I was reading about a water processing plant being built someplace near Shiprock. Do you know if they have the same concerns about uranium? And so how are they going to deal with that? that is a question for Navajo Nation Public Water System Supervision Program. Second, that's on the regulatory side. So Navajo EPA from the Public Water can answer that question. But I can relay that information to them. Yolanda Barney leads that department for Navajo EPA, the Public Water System Supervision Program, and she can respond to that and answer your questions about that. That's Navajo Nation, Navajo EPA.
And I wanted to just read Representative Joseph Hernandez's comment in New Mexico. So he mentions that he represents the 9 chapters, town of Kirkland, city of Farmington, but Representative Ortiz represents the community of Taos and is a strong environmental advocate. So there you go, Dr. Tommy Rock. Maybe we can work with our community here to help connect you with some of these elected leaders to work on and support you with some of the work that you're doing out there.
Cool. Well, that's good to know.
I'll make sure I connect you.
All right. Well, it's like I gotta go hit the road again. I got quite a ways to go. So,
all right. Thank you so much, Dr. Tommy Rock. All right. All right. We'll continue on. We'll have you back in the future and drive safe, Tommy. So thank you. So I wanted to just say to everyone again that's listening, today's Cafe 6 is going to be a little bit longer. And I wanted to, again, thank all of our guests for listening today and showing up in this space where there's courage, depth, and a fierce commitment to your people, our people. This wasn't just educational. This is always a wake-up call. So to everyone listening, this is why we created Cafe 6, to hear voices like Harley Interpreter and Dr. Tommy Rock, to talk about what's not being talked about, and to organize, to act, and to heal. So remember to follow us on social media. And if this is a conversation that moved you, please share it. Donate if you can. We do this work year-round on sovereign lands, and every bit helps us to keep going. So this event was brought to you by the Arizona Native Democrats, a majority tribal team working across the Navajo Nation, Hopi, White Mountain Apache, and now expanding on to San Carlos, Yavapai Apache, and the Tohono O'odham Nation. We believe every Native voter matters and that we are here to make sure no one is left behind. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it on over to our wonderful program director, Missa Foy. Missa, go on ahead. All right, you had the floor.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you so much for hosting the first hour. So, as we know right now, everything feels like it's rushing at us and everything feels chaotic. And all of you are here because you're engaged for the betterment of your community. And I know that so many folks are taking action in the communities where you live. And we have an opportunity in Navajo and Apache counties to work together to promote better renewable energy policy in both of those counties. So today for our second hour, we're going to hear from 2 folks who are working with citizens in both of those communities to ensure that we have great renewable energy ordinances. And I will not discuss any further that. I'll leave it to the experts. But first, I would like to introduce Tim Grubbs. Tim is the founder and community advocate. He started the Adjacent Possible in 2021 to focus on making the business case for enterprises and governments to incorporate sustainability into operations and future plans. Tim works with advanced energy stakeholders and businesses on practical finance solutions to transition to the clean energy economy. And he lives up here in Navajo County. He has a ton of experience about the private and public sector that he's going to be bringing to us to help us better organize, to help us advocate for our communities. Our second guest is Sam Cloud. And Sam is a dedicated community organizer and advocate. She is a proud Native Arizonan with deep roots and extensive experience in rural parts of the state. She has a background in social work, activism, and nonprofit leadership. She has mobilized grassroots movements, trained hundreds of volunteers, and built coalitions to advance social justice, environmental justice, and civic engagement. As a former deputy organizing director and regional field director, she has worked closely with rural communities to empower local voices and drive policy change. She is passionate about inclusivity and advocacy, and Sam continues to be a champion of equitable initiatives that create lasting impacts across the state of Arizona. And so, with that, I would like to welcome both Tim Grubbs and Sam Cloud to our conversation. And I'm adding pins now. And I will hand it over to you both. Welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you for that introduction. Hi, Tim. Do you
Good
want
morning,
me?
everybody?
Should I share the presentation or which one of us is doing that?
Let's see. I think I can pull it up here.
Amazing. And you both have sharing options, so go for it.
Okay.
Awesome. I'll just tell you when to move. If you're going to share it, I'll just tell you when to move along. Perfect. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for joining us today and giving us the opportunity to come and talk to everyone. Just a little bit about myself. My name's Sam Cloud. I am a native Arizonan. I was born and raised here. I've lived here all my life. One of my most favorite things about Arizona is just how beautiful and diverse it is. So I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about Greenlight America, which is the organization that I'm a part of, working in conjunction with Tim and a number of other organizations across the state. So a little bit about Greenlight America. I'm the clean energy organizer for Arizona for Greenlight America. And Greenlight America is basically a mobilization organization. So what that really means is that we work with partners locally in counties and cities across the state, but we work across the country. So we organize in a number of different places around the country. I just happen to be the Arizona person. And what we do is we partner up with different groups to try to work to push clean energy projects through and be built in communities where they'll benefit the community. We are independent, we're a nonprofit organization. So that also means that we don't take money from developers. We're completely nonprofit. Our stake in the game, so to speak, is that we believe that clean energy is the best way to help save our environment and preserve our resources and give us all cleaner air, cleaner water, all the things that we know that we need, particularly here in Arizona. So I want to talk a little bit about what that looks like or what our vision is. So there are two things that Greenlight America believes. First, we know we need to build tons of clean energy. We know how important that is. We know that we need to reduce our carbon emissions. We need to reduce our reliability on things like fossil fuel. And we also know that exponentially we are growing, particularly here in Arizona. We are constantly seeing an influx of folks moving here. The population is growing. And what we also know is that we are having a hard time balancing the need with what's available. One of the other things that we know is that local support can really make or break a project. All these clean energy development projects that are large utility scale are really decided on the local level. It's not a state thing, it's not a federal thing. It is county by county, it's your planning and zoning committees, it's your boards of supervisors that make the decisions on whether or not we as a community are going to participate in building clean energy projects. So that's really kind of why Greenlight America exists. And it's a nice place to be because we're not funded by people that are pushing projects through. We're not accountable to those folks. But we do know that renewable energy development is inevitable. It is the way to go. It is the way to save our environment. And the thing that we control on a local level is how that occurs and how it benefits our communities. And that's why it's so important for us to mobilize in our local communities in terms of renewable energy projects. So one of the big reasons we came to be is that we know we have to have a voice in having these projects developed. You can go ahead and continue to the next slide. So one of the things I think that impacts Arizona the most and is most important is we all know that our water supply is running out. We know that we have to do something in order to be able to maintain our communities, our environment, and make sure that everyone has the water that we need, as well as cleaning our air. I thought this was a really cool graphic. If you take a look, it talks about the cost of electric power to fish and wildlife and water. And so you can see that clean energy, wind power, solar power uses very little water. So what we're doing by building clean energy projects is we're not just improving our carbon emissions on the environment, we're also reducing the amount of water that we use to create that energy, which is a huge, huge issue here in Arizona. I'm 45 years old, and my entire life, I've been preached to, right, even in school, about how much water we're using, how to reduce our usage. But the fact of the matter is, we all see the water table dropping. We all see our lakes dropping. We know that rain is not happening as often as we hope, while we're battling things like increasing heat waves that last even longer than they used to. You know, this last summer was brutal. I live in Tucson. But it was brutal across the state. We saw very little rain, and that heat wave extended all the way through, my gosh, September, October, the end of October. It didn't cool off down here until well into mid-November. That means that our water is evaporating. It is disappearing at an even faster rate. Clean energy uses so much less water and conserves that for all of our communities across the state. Do you want to go ahead and move on to the next slide? So Tim and I are here both to talk about different types of clean energy and just dive into what they are and how they work and that sort of thing. I'm going to start off by talking about my favorite thing, which is solar energy, which is obviously Arizona is a prime place to capitalize on the sun and the power it can give us. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. And part of, you know, talking with folks like you and giving information like this is because we want people to be educated and informed, but to also feel comfortable talking to your families, your friends about what clean energy actually looks like, what the pros are, and sort of reducing that misinformation that's out there. So let's talk about solar. Obviously, it's energy we receive from the sun. Those are solar panels, whether it be on your home or whether it be solar panel fields. Those are able to actually absorb energy from the sun, even on a cloudy day. Okay, we can maximize what that sunlight is giving us and turn that into energy. One of the things that's really important to know about solar that a lot of folks don't know is that it's really actually a farmer's best friend. So farmers throughout all sorts of lands, specifically here in like desert-like areas or in Arizona where we're dealing with depleting water sources, all of those things because of drought, everything else. Those all impact whether or not farmers can yield good crops every year. One of the things that solar panels do is not ruin the land. What they actually do is they give the soil and the land time to rest. They provide shade. It gives soil a break to replenish and rejuvenate so that we can yield good crops. And the cool thing about conserving water is that it's also going to give you the ability to shade areas and use the land that solar is built on for a dual purpose. So for example, lots of farmers that are utilizing their land for solar as well will also have their livestock grazing on the land. it gives the opportunity to use it for a dual purpose rather than just be there for the solar panels. Another really cool thing that's happening across Arizona, there's some pilot programs in different areas. I'm sure you're familiar with things like the canals that we have that moves water around the state. There are some pilot projects where solar panels have been installed over the canals. And one of the coolest things about those projects is it's actually reducing the amount of water that's evaporated from the canals because it's providing cover and shade. So really, it does not take away from the ability to still use the land for a good purpose, particularly when it comes to farmers. Not to mention that it's carbon-free energy, so we're reducing what damage we're doing to the environment, which we know is crucial at this stage in the game. That's how we're going to help combat things like heat waves, climate change, and the things that are driving our energy costs up exponentially. So some other benefits, it's replacing lots of that pollution that goes into the environment, as we're not creating any sort of chemical leakage. Some things that happen when folks hear about solar, sometimes they're misinformed and believe that they can do things like catch on fire spontaneously and things like that. And that's just not the case. I'm actually really happy to report that that does not happen. That's not a thing. But there's a lot of fear around, what do you do with these panels if something goes wrong? Panels actually have a really long lifespan. And once they're decommissioned, usually projects have a plan in place on what to do with those panels after their lifespan is complete. If you can click to the next slide for me. So some important things to know. Again, solar and agriculture can exist together very easily and actually really support each other. It's also something that only takes up a tiny fraction of US farmland. So when we have those dual use approaches, farmers can grow crops, they can graze livestock under or alongside and restore the soil that they're growing on. It can also really help promote flourishing biodiverse local ecosystems. And so the climate benefits really outweigh costs or any risks. If you could go ahead and click on for me there. It does not increase things like our water use pressures. Again, solar uses so much less water than any other type of energy that we have going on related to fossil fuels. It's also very safe for humans. It's very safe for the environment. And we know that fossil fuels are not the same. They produce a lot of pollution. They do a lot of things that damage the environment and conserve our resources. And there's been so many studies that have been done about the benefits of clean and renewable energy versus fossil fuel generation. So some other really cool, important things that I think folks should know about that I really want to share is solar in Arizona has actually created almost 10,000 jobs up to the year 2024. And with the amount of projects that are coming into our state, we have the ability to create so many more jobs as different things are closing down, such as coal plants, for example. The other thing is that 1,429,000 plus Arizona homes can be powered by the amount of solar energy that's already been installed in the state. So what that means is that energy is being pushed into the grid and reducing the amount of energy that we're using in other ways. The other cool thing about building renewable energy across the state is the way it can benefit our communities, not just by the environment. It's not just supporting our environment and helping us save our water. It's also generating a ton of tax revenue that benefits our communities. So what that means is when the tax revenue is created and is distributed, we're doing things like dumping that money into the education system, which is a huge concern right now. That money is going to help repair and build roads. It's funding a number of public resource things that we need. Fire stations, police, all of those things. That tax revenue is generated and goes right back into the community and helps support our communities be strong. Arizona is actually ranked 5th for the solar capacity out of all the states in the US because, as we know, we have a ton of sun. We have a ton of sun here, and it can generate a whole lot of energy and really help us clear up our environment. Can you move on to the next slide? I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tim for a moment to talk a little bit about another type of renewable energy, which is wind.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate you sharing, and appreciate you, Missa, and everyone here for having us in your space today. My name is Tim Grubbs, and as Missa said, I'm a consultant, and I mostly work with a lot of environmental organizations and also some clean energy associations. But here I live in Navajo County, and that's why I'm kind of getting involved here because there aren't any campaigns here related to this, and it's something that is important to me and I believe in, and that's why I'm sharing today. Want to talk about because I live in Show Low, Linden area in Navajo County, and up here in the northwest part of Arizona or northeast part of Arizona, we do have wind energy capacity as well as solar. And so wind similarly has a lot of benefits like solar does that actually will be helpful for the environment in the long run. One of the main reasons that I like wind energy and I support it is the low carbon emissions. And probably a lot of you are already well schooled in the science of climate change and the fact that the carbon emissions that we're putting into the atmosphere are making the environment hotter and all the impacts to both people and wildlife and nature from those impacts. Here you can see the drastic difference between the carbon emissions, the grams of carbon emissions from coal, oil, natural gas, and then you see the huge drop when you get down to solar photovoltaic technology and also wind power, which are really low compared to gas, oil, and coal. And also, gas puts up other greenhouse gases like methane and things like that solar and wind don't. One thing that gets asked sometime is, thanks, Topher. One thing that gets asked a lot of times is, sorry, let me go back to the slides here, is what is something that gets shared sometimes is that you have to manufacture the wind turbines. Doesn't that use a lot of greenhouse gases in the manufacturing process? And yes, it does use some greenhouse gases, but there's been studies done on this based on the energy and carbon savings you get from the entire life of a wind turbine. That energy savings and that greenhouse gas savings that you get over other energy sources, that gets recouped in an average of between 5 and 7 months, or what most of the studies say. And these wind turbines can last 30 to 35 years. So after about 7 months, you're getting purely clean energy out of this for 29 or 30 or more years. So it's something that's really you hear sometimes. So I just wanted to clarify that. Clean energy, both solar and wind, happen to be among the cheapest sources of energy right now. And this chart comes from a report called the Lazard Levelized Cost of Energy, and this shows the cost per megawatt hour, so per energy unit, basically, of utility scale solar and utility scale onshore wind. And they're both, you can see they're both kind of in the lower range among all different energy production sources. And this happens to be before any tax credit or incentive. They're cheaper just on a on a one-to-one basis. Excuse me, let me go back to my screen. Something that comes up a lot is the impact of wind turbines on birds, and there is an impact. And in fact, any utility scale developer of wind energy should be encouraged to implement architecture on their wind turbines that are more protective for birds, because there is architecture that can help prevent bird deaths. However, I did want to just show like the other threats to birds. Cats kill 2.4 billion birds, and collisions with buildings and glass kill 600 million birds per year. And so that's something I think is important to know every day. If you do care about birds, one thing you can do is get kind of decals and put them on your windows to help birds from crashing into your windows, because it's something that does impact birds. And wind-based turbines do impact birds, but there are things that can be done about it. And the other thing to bring up too is the threat of climate change to birds is much greater. The Audubon Society has said 2/3 of bird species in the U.S. are threatened right now by changes in climate from climate change. Fracking kills a ton of birds, is more impactful than wind-based turbines. So it's just, you have to look at this. You have to look at this all with a broad perspective, I think. And then that's what I've got. I'm going to pass that along to Sam to lead this next part of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tim. So one thing that's really important when we're talking about renewable energy, and like I mentioned earlier, these things are really decided on a local level. So what's happening right now, which is kind of crazy to me, and I think infringes to a degree on the democratic process and our ability to have a voice as a local community. So what's going on right now is across the state, a number of local governments, whether it be county government or city, are looking at determining regulations that basically ban our ability to even consider renewable projects coming into our area. So what that is it's an ordinance, right? So ordinances are really powerful tools that happen on a very local level, and they make or break our ability to benefit from solar or wind power. So one of the most important things we can do or take action at right now across our state, across the country, is to advocate to our local government about not capping or not banning, not putting in place regulations that limit our ability to even consider whether or not a project would be beneficial to our community. So a number of bans have already happened that like basically have the effect of creating so many obstacles that we are no longer considered a desirable place for any developer to go and to try to build, because we have all these restrictions in place that make it impossible for them to come in and even pitch a project, so to speak. If you could go to the next slide for me, Tim. So what we're looking at is helping educate folks in local communities about advocating for thoughtful rules that relate to responsible solar and wind development, creating jobs, and where that revenue, like the tax revenue, will go to address community needs and goals. What I don't like about ordinances that are already happening is that in some places, bans are being considered that would eliminate the ability to ever in our future build things like solar panels on a large scale. The problem with that is that that takes away our voice in terms of what we want for our own community. And so it's really important to advocate to our elected officials locally that having thoughtful rules in place are very important, right? So what that means is, let's talk about what a thoughtful rule or ordinance might be. when we're looking at things like that, we want to really advocate that there are reasonable or no caps on acreage or other restrictive conditions. And what I mean by that is folks might think that when a solar panel development comes in, that, let's say they're covering 100 acres, and people might think, okay, that means all 100 acres are covered in solar panels and you can't do anything else with it. That's not the case at all. So solar farms might have large acreage, but that doesn't mean that it's completely covered in solar panels, right? A lot of that is protected land, protected open land to promote wildlife, to promote soil that can rest and rejuvenate. And then there's solar panels spread out throughout that area. The problem is that when an ordinance creates a cap on how much acreage can be used for any type of development, it may become, again, undesirable to any developer that wants to explore building in our area because there's not enough room for them to do that and to spread things out. So when we create those big acreage caps, it basically means that solar projects won't even be presented to our local communities or government. Another thing about thoughtful rules that could be put in place is looking after our community interests. So what we do is people worry about things like, will it be too close to a neighborhood? Will it leach chemicals? And we already kind of talked about that, right? That's not actually a thing, but that's a real fear that some people might experience based on misinformation that they've been fed. It doesn't contaminate water. All of those are really unfortunate framing that gets put out there. And number one, it's unfortunate because it's not true. But the other thing is that there are dozens of safety measures that go into ensuring that there isn't any issue, that fires aren't getting started, that neighborhoods won't be impacted in a dangerous way. There's all sorts of safety precautions with all of these development projects. And usually there are also sometimes rules considered about how close those projects can be built. And this is where ordinances can really become a barrier to us being able to push through projects that would clean our air and clean our water and give us better resources. What happens is if we build a project or permit a project and it's too far away from the grid because of an ordinance that says it can't be near anything, any residential, any city, whatever, guess what happens? We can't plug it into the grid. It's just basically a hunk of junk, right? It's a solar field that isn't benefiting anyone. It's not actually feeding into the grid. It's not reducing our usage. It's not benefiting anyone. It becomes useless. In order for those projects to have the effect that we want them to have, you have to be able to build them close enough to plug into the grid. That's super important. The other thing is, underlying zoning requirements, like I said, where they go, how close they can be to things. What we really want to push for and advocate for is that when decision makers are considering rules related to this type of development, that it's based on science and evidence and not fear mongering and misinformation. There are reasonable setbacks, of a setback is how close it can be, right, to something else, whether that be residential or whatever. Reasonable setbacks of 150 to 300 feet are completely reasonable and allow those energy sources to be plugged into the grid and actually benefit our communities. So one of the things that we can do as residents is any opportunity you have to speak to boards of supervisors, planning and zoning committees about advocating for reasonable rules and not things that will create barriers or block our ability to even consider if a project is worth our time and will benefit our community is really super important. Tim, can you move to the next slide for me? So let's talk about some things that are happening right now in our own community, right? So Navajo County, for example, some of the things that are currently happening is they are considering an ordinance, and I think Tim might have a little more detail and information on this, But they're considering an ordinance that includes things like really, really large setbacks away from different things. And that could make or break whether or not we have the ability to even consider any projects coming into our area. Tim, do you want to add anything?
I think you covered that well. Yeah, so we do have upcoming ordinances in Navajo and Apache County that they're considering right now. They're working on drafting those right now, and I think I'll go a little bit more into that in some of the next slides here, Sam. Oh yeah, here we go. I'll just jump right in. So Navajo County is currently in the process of considering a new ordinance. They held a few listening sessions recently with the public, and their staff is drafting that up. And I'll give there's an opportunity to provide more feedback on that through April 29th. But the items they're looking at are setbacks from residences. The current setback is 1/2 mile for wind. So they're looking at extending that. They're looking at buffers from national and state parks. They're considering a 2 to 5 mile buffer. And I think that's mostly driven by like the view of wind farms. They're doing a preference for sites with minimal visual impact and previously disturbed lands, which obviously if that's a preference factor, that's a good thing as long as it's not, always like straight out required. They're reviewing upfront bond requirements in case of abandonment or incomplete decommissioning. And on that, bonding requirements for decommissioning are important and necessary. I think we just want to make sure that they're applying those bonding requirements fairly, not making them too high, and also applying those to other types of use. If they're gonna apply it to solar and wind, they ought to apply it to a gas plant or another like an industrial facility. Making sure they're being fair to this industry, and they're also looking at requirements for community benefits, which, as we said, is an important thing. And it's also important to make sure that the community benefits that are asked for are reasonable so that development can go forward. These developers operate in our you know our capitalism environment, and so they are required to make a certain profit for their investors, which I think is important for them. But that benefit with the community, they definitely can provide benefits for the community, and it's important to learn about the projects and know what the community can ask for reasonably and get from the developers. And they're also considering these things above are apply to wind. They're considering adding a new solar ordinance that is similar to the wind ordinance. The setbacks that are needed and things like that are a little bit different for wind than solar, but that's what Navajo County is looking at right now. And there's some upcoming engagement opportunities. Both Navajo County and Apache County are in the process of considering renewable energy ordinances. Right now in Navajo County, it's in the early stages of development and drafting. There's a town hall with Supervisor Whitesinger on April 29th at 6 p.m. at the Pinetop Lakeside Town Hall. Her town hall is not specific to renewable ordinances, but I expect it will come up because this is, becoming a hot topic in the county since this issue is up. So if anyone would like to attend, I encourage you to attend. It's been really what we've seen a lot in meetings is that the people that are opposed to renewables show up in force to these meetings, but the local people that maybe support renewables there's not as many there, and the people that are supportive of renewables are mostly from the developer companies. So important to try to get out there if you can make it out there and say, if you hear anti-renewable stuff, counter and say, hey, there are people in the community that support renewables. And there's also a form here that Sam is sharing to provide your input. So this is an easy way to provide your input on the county renewable energy ordinance. a testimony form. So they'll let you write a couple paragraphs about how you feel about renewables and expressing your support. And we have heard from supervisors that they do want to hear, they see the benefits of renewables because they've done the research into it, but they want to hear from more local people that support renewables. Then after that, probably over the summer, there will be some county hearings, a planning and zoning hearing, and a board of supervisors hearing. And both of those will have opportunities to go and testify, probably about 3-minute testimony or so is how much they usually give the public to voice your support for renewables. We expect there will be a lot of opposition to renewables there as well. But it's good to be there, show up, and kind of balance out the room. And I'm going to be in touch with Missa to let her know when those meetings are happening. And Mike just asked about the May 1st. So over in Apache County, let me go through Apache County first. They're also in the early stages of development and drafting of their ordinances. There will be county hearings with public testimony happening in summer and early fall. Planning and zoning hearings to officially consider these ordinances. We are hearing, and it's word of mouth right now, Mike. I haven't seen an actual agenda posted for that yet, but May 1st, there will be a planning and zoning discussion on the renewable energy ordinance. They're not very far along in the drafting of that ordinance, so I don't expect they're going to take a vote. And I'm not sure at this point on May 1st if they're going to take public testimony, but we'll find out, and I'll let Missa know so we can communicate that out to everyone. And then over summer they will have a board of supervisors hearing to vote on that in summer or early fall of 2025 is what we're expecting. That's a fairly aggressive timeline to write a new ordinance, but they may be able to meet those timelines. And let's see. We have some other resources from engagement, and we'll share these links. These are from Greenlight and all the good work they do. One of them is to get connected with Greenlight, who I've worked with a lot, and they do great work to be an advocate for renewable energy in the White Mountain region. I will say White Mountain and Northwestern Arizona region will include, because not everybody's in the White Mountains here. And to let people know that you support renewable energy in Northeast Arizona. And there's a link here that will tell you how to write an email to your supervisors on your support for renewable energy that we can share. And
Yeah, those forms are there. And thank you, Tim. Yeah, please also feel free to share all of those links with your networks, with your friends, with anyone and everyone you can. Because we really, really, really at the top of the priority list here is to ensure that we can advocate for land use regulations that responsibly allow us to consider renewable energy development and make sure that our communities get a say on what's being built as well as how we benefit from it. So
thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Contact information. Sam, you got anything to close us up?
Just, really thank you so much for your time. And also, please feel free to reach out to myself or Michelle or Tim or all of us. If you have further questions, we're happy to come back and deep dive into more information on anything specific folks might have questions on. And again, please, if you do happen to live in Apache County, please get in touch with me as we're definitely seeing a lot of interesting opposition sort of rise up at this point in time. And it would be great to have conversations and connect with folks that might be living directly there.
Thank you so very much for that really informative slideshow. It was super helpful to kind of put ourselves in this place and understand what we need to do as citizens to help protect our water and our air here in Northern Arizona. So I just want to let everyone know, I know a lot of folks who join us have issues with connectivity and being able to do this on a computer versus on a phone. So an email will follow up with the links provided in this presentation. So you don't have to worry about trying to switch between screens right now. We've got you covered. You'll get everything you need. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hands. And so I have a question that I think I'd like to just kick the questions off with. What are the most important things a county can include in the renewable ordinance to ensure that these projects are feasible?
Sam, do you want me to give that a shot, or do you want to go first? I'll say what I think. I think it has to do with what we've seen in other counties that prevent renewables are like caps on acreage that are too small. Because these projects do take up a lot of land, and that's an impact to them. But as Sam pointed out, for the most part, like wind, you can do agriculture with it as well, and solar as well. And in fact, there's studies that say solar helps the soil underneath. So there's not too big of an impact from using the land, except for that you're using up a bunch of land. But that's one thing, and also the setbacks as well, like shorter setbacks. And the issue is here in the reason a lot of projects are wanting to site here in northeastern Arizona is because we have strong transmission lines here. We have the energy infrastructure from the old coal plants that have been sited here, and I'll acknowledge all the historical issues with those and how they've been sited on, on sovereign land without the consultation of the community in a lot of cases. But the fact is, right now there exists strong infrastructure here, and we want the ability for those projects to be sited close to that infrastructure. If they're not able to site close to the infrastructure, a lot of times either the project won't happen, or they'll have to site further away from the transmission infrastructure and then tear up a lot of land and have a lot of impacts to connect to that transmission infrastructure. And it's really expensive for the developers to do it. So a lot of times they'll just back out. So that's kind of I think the two major considerations. And Sam, I'll leave you. Anything else you have to add to that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think those are the two most crucial points that should be communicated, in whatever way you feel is most appropriate individually. Yeah. I second what Tim said. Michelle, did you want to add anything? Okay.
I think that's great. It can be wonky, and all we can do is just advocate for the most accessible form of an ordinance that lets us consider projects in our counties.
Thank you. Thanks to all three of you. Angie, what's your question?
My question was, I said it too soon earlier, so it got lost in the thing. Have you ever considered doing a clean energy project for vehicles, like a project to change them from using gasoline to something greener?
Yeah, I can answer that question. I think Tim knows there's a lot of different organizations that are doing electrification around vehicle advocacy. Greenlight America focuses on utility scale renewable energy projects because we really want to help solidify a stronger grid that gives everybody access to affordable and sustainable energy. So we just stay in that lane in advocating for those kind of projects. But I do think that's a really worthwhile campaign. And I know there are some other local groups that tend to advocate for that.
Yeah, a good group to look into is Plug-in America, who's doing a lot of work around that particular issue. So I'll just throw out a shout out to them. Plug-in America, and they can tell you everything about those efforts that are going on right now to electrify our vehicles.
Mike, what's your question?
Um, I wanted to know what's your opinion of the SRP plan with the St. John's plant that's, I guess maybe it's still being decommissioned, or at least only 2 years further down the road for the to put in the modular small scale nuclear reactors. I think they were going to put two of them in to replace the capacity of the St. John's plant. And then I guess the other part to the question is, the White Mountain Independent article in the last paper about the effects. They seem to put St. John's and Springerville coal plants kind of up in the air by delaying their decertification or their environmental to meet the environmental requirements that cause the those providers to begin shutting them down.
Sure, yeah. I don't know, Michelle, or do you guys want to you want me to take a shot at that?
Yeah, go for it, Tim.
And we actually do have some people on the phone that know more about the coal plant stuff than I do. I recognize Nicole Horsherders here with us from TNA, and she's been very involved in a lot of those issues. So, but I'll say coal. We kind of talked about the impacts of it before, like the negative impacts on the environment and water usage and all that. So it does have a lot of negative impacts, and we know. The president has been, he put out an executive order, encouraging coal plants to stay open or trying to keep them to stay open. We'll see how economically feasible it is. I just think it's for a lot of reasons in kind of an inferior technology. It costs more. It's clunky. It has all kinds of external impacts. And I think a lot of the energy industry is trying to move away from that. And I don't think you see, investors quite as excited about investing in coal when possibly a new administration comes in 3 years and it takes away the ability for that to go forward. So I think there's just a lot of risk to that too, from an investment perspective. The small nuclear modular reactors, also that's another issue that's come up a lot. It seems to be really popular among sort of the Republican crew. I'm not sure why, but it does have to me it has some negative impacts. Obviously, the kind of the mining of uranium in some of our national forests. There's a threat. There's been a lot of talk about from a push from some people on the right to reopen um, the and I'm going to mess up the name. It's the Bwaj Novho uh, protected space near the Grand Canyon to open that up um, to uranium mining there. And we've just talked about the impacts on like the water table and the impacts of transporting that in some cases across sovereign land. And then you saw the charts on water usage. Nuclear uses 720 gallons per megawatt hour, as opposed to solar, which uses 20 gallons per megawatt hour, and water or wind that uses 1 gallon per megawatt hour. That's from a Trout Unlimited report that they did this summer. So there's a lot of reasons that it's just not a good idea. And the other problem with it also is that the timelines to get even a small nuclear reactor built they're not quick enough to meet the energy demand that Arizona needs for APS has said that they need to increase energy or electricity capacity by 40% by 2031. So that's just in 6 years, which is an incredibly fast timeline. That's driven by a lot of things: extreme heat, the abundance of manufacturing and data centers located in Phoenix, more electric vehicles being used. So all that's driving this and then population growth in Arizona. That's all driving this huge need for increase. So the nuclear, just on a practical perspective, it won't happen quick enough to kind of meet that need. Renewables are the way to go. They're the cheapest source of energy and just also, they have the least kind of externalities as well. That's the way I see it. So that's just my personal opinion, not representing anyone, but that's just my personal opinion on that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would just reply that that, you know, if we don't have filler um, power generation, you know, when the wind isn't blowing and it's dark, right now that's coal or natural gas.
Yeah.
And so, and if it's coal, you have to keep a coal plant running at a certain idle space to be able to provide the required quickly. These modular nukes seems like they would be much quicker, that you wouldn't have to run them when you don't need the power. And then I just wonder about the water consumption. Yeah, I agree there. And what's done with the waste.
Yeah.
I'm afraid we're stuck with the Pinyon Plain mine at
Yeah.
this point. Just hopefully we can keep more out.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all I just think it's something that we have to look at if we're practically trying to get rid of coal and high carbon fuels.
Yeah, yeah, good. All fair points, Mike, and thanks for sharing those. And I'll just say one thing to look at on the because there's a lot of talk about intermittency of solar and wind, like what happens when the sun goes down, what happens when the wind's not blowing. One thing to look into, and I can encourage you to look into, we didn't really talk about much here, but is battery energy storage systems. That technology has advanced a lot in the last few years. So there is on our grid, there is battery energy storage systems being built that can kind of store that capacity of wind and solar. And then also a lot of plants are using the wind and solar at the same time. So when the wind's not blowing, they'll have the solar capacity. They're building extra capacity as well. So this is getting a little wonky, but yeah, the batteries are really good now, and so I think potentially you could build enough if you could site enough battery energy storage, you wouldn't have too much of a need for some of the other stuff. I'm not saying no need. That's more technical than I can get, but a lot of that gets dissipated by that battery storage technology now. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I agree that battery storage is what we need. But also that's sort of in the long term. I've been off grid for 20 years, and I'm just recently went to lithium ion batteries, which are great, but I have all kinds of problems with the, kids mining lithium
yeah, yeah. It's
and
another
stuff.
impact.
But yeah, the good thing is that the large scale grid storage is much less toxic and coming along faster than the next new thing in battery storage that I see something every month on, because I follow that. And
Yeah.
I'll shut up and give somebody else a turn.
Hey, thanks,
Thanks,
Mike. Yeah, a
Mike.
lot of things to consider for sure.
Wonderful. Jody, I saw you had your hand up a minute ago. Do you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry with my phone. I'm keep trying to figure out how to unmute. Um, yes, I just wanted to put this out there for historical purposes. Tim and Sam. In 1990, I think it was 91, there was a local group that was formed called CASE, Citizen Alliance for Safe Energy. And there were some folks trying to start a nuclear power plant at that time out in Springerville. So this was a reaction to that. And we were able to get enough people to show up at town halls and other secret meetings that weren't so secret, and try to get them to divulge exactly what was going on. And it went up in a puff of smoke just overnight. This group that was this business that was trying to start the nuclear power plant just left the area. So just so you know that existed.
Thanks, Jody.
Yeah. And many thanks to Jody for all the years of effort she's put into keeping our forests usable and keeping our air clean and our energy use limited. Jody, you've been a real leader on this for years in the White Mountains, so thank you.
Well, thank you.
And Lauren, you had a question earlier. Did it get answered, or do you still have a question for us?
Thank you, Missa. And thank you guys for the presentation. I really appreciate learning more about clean energy alternatives, especially in light of recent executive orders pushing coal development on tribal lands. You mentioned that these projects often begin at the local level, and that it's important to advocate at local governments for, thoughtful energy policies. With that in mind, I wanted to ask how are Indigenous peoples being included in these conversations and developments? I say this because over 70% of Apache County residents are Native American. And although this particular project might not be located on tribal lands, this kind of leads to my concern. How will the broader Indigenous population in Apache County benefit, especially if the project isn't on a reservation? Are there current efforts to bring renewable energy infrastructure to tribal lands? And I also just, want to be candid. There's often skepticism in our communities because we've seen time and time again how projects move forward without us or even at our expense. For example, I've been working to secure a home site lease in my community, which is located in Apache County. It's been, a slow and frustrating process, taking me 8 years to date. Recently, they voted on the vote on my lease was delayed due to concerns about California's carbon credits, because our forest catches their emissions. And so that means I still can't build on my land while California continues to develop and pollute. And of course, we know that water from tribal lands is being diverted elsewhere to Phoenix, Las Vegas, and we rarely see the benefits of that. And so while I support clean energy, I hope these conversations seriously consider how Indigenous peoples experience these systems. Not just as stewards of the land, but as people still fighting for basic rights on it. How do you plan to build true partnerships with us, not just use our resources? And I'm sorry, I know that was a bunch of questions in that, but I just want to, you all to consider including Native Americans in these discussions. And I'm wondering how that will happen.
Yeah. I don't know, Michelle. Yeah, Michelle, did you want to address
Sure,
that?
yeah, I'm happy to kick us off. Thank you, Lauren, for that very thoughtful question. And I really resonate with everything that you shared. I think it's a long history of any development that there has been a system of oppression that has used Native Americans and their land as a tool to make money and not benefit the communities. And personally, it's something that I'm very driven by advocating around. I think one of the things that we can say, right, is kind of like what Sam was saying about this ordinance fight. Advocating for land use regulations that benefit the community is the first way to make sure that, especially in a place like Apache County, Indigenous peoples are prioritized in the conversation, right? If we can help create access to bring more folks into the room to express what they want from these projects and what kind of community benefits they need to see when a project is introduced, those are the kinds of things that can become part of law, right? If we're not in that room, then we can't advocate for those kinds of things. So I would say the first start is us all coming together and coming to those meetings together to advocate for what we want to see. And then I think another piece of this is, a developer is obviously looking for a place to put their utility because it will make money, right? We know that that's their focus. We live in a capitalist society. for worse, in my opinion, but it is what it is. And so that's why I think it's so critical that we make sure that developers and lawmakers understand that they are both accountable to the community that they're serving within, so that we get exactly what we need from these projects or keep advocating for more. And some of that could look like, well, if this project's being developed here, what's the next step to creating stronger transmission lines so that Indigenous communities are the ones that can also benefit from this energy? What are the community benefits that are going towards tribal nations in this county to make sure that we're benefiting from the fact that you're getting tax revenue from this project? Those are kind of the ways that I think we can take our first initial big steps towards ensuring that Indigenous people are prioritized when it comes to renewable energy development. And then the story never ends, right? Our advocacy, more than ever, and Indigenous people are the experts in this, have been advocating for centuries. And I think once a project is instilled in a community, the advocacy doesn't end there, right? We keep holding people accountable, decision makers and developers. We keep advocating for more benefits to our communities and advocating for the benefits to serve those communities directly. So the solar project doesn't have to be on tribal nation land in order for a tribal nation to benefit from that energy. And that's some of the stuff that I think we can advocate for in our local government meetings. Tim, is there anything you want to share also from some of the other advocacy around renewable energy?
Well, yeah, one thing I just want to note it, I think just bring up, and we could probably maybe talk about this some other time because we won't have time to talk about it right now. But right now, the transmission lines to Tucson Electric Power do go across the Navajo Nation, and there's ongoing discussions right now about getting Tucson Electric Power because they're renegotiating the basically the royalties that they pay to the Navajo Nation. So that's ongoing discussions right now about how much TEP pays the Navajo Nation for those lines going across the nation there. So it's a very clear opportunity right there to try to get something get better compensation because the offers from TEP so far have not been, we haven't been satisfied with them yet. So I just wanted to flag that. And you can email me. I can connect you to people that can talk to you more about that effort.
Thank you. I really want to thank all three of you for being on Cafe 6 today. This conversation, of course, will be ongoing and evolving. I also would like to say thank you so much to Nicole and Adrian, who brought their experience and information to the call today. Please watch out for our emails. We will include all of the links that were shared in the presentation. We will also be sure to include all of the local events where we're going to be heading around discussing this further and getting more community input. So Sam or Tim, do you have any closing words as we wrap up this Cafe 6 today?
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure to be here. Everyone had such thoughtful contributions and questions, and just thank you very much.
Wow, thank you all. I really love this space, and please, all of you who are here attending, you are welcome to the space next time, 2 Fridays from now, May the 1st. We have Attorney General Chris Mays on the call. So please tell your friends, tell your family. They have an opportunity to ask questions of our extraordinary Attorney General Chris Mays in this space on May 1st. So thank you all so much, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
Bye.